Oh, hello there. Yes, Sunday. Still dark, still cold. Pussycat is in. Yeah, Pussycat is in. He's been outside, checked on the lack of cats out there, which is good, and decided it's too cold. Rightly so. Yes, today, as I said yesterday, I'm going to have a look at the policy exchange. And first up, I thought it was just the last thing they produced. Andrew Gilligan, who we'll come back to in a second, or three, produced a dossier, as it was called in the press. Come back to that later as well. Called Professionalism is Not Relevant, which is about junior doctors and their dissatisfaction. And it goes into some detail about sort of workplace dissatisfaction and demands for more money. It does say that there are grounds for the doctors being hacked off, and perhaps this has become channeled into the notion of pay, which I think most reasonable people would agree. Junior doctors aren't brilliantly paid, and let's face it, they do work in really bad conditions. One of the reasons why the public hasn't magically turned against these strikes that are going on. The piece, though, however, is primarily set up to make a case that the doctors and their activism is being driven by a cabal of lefties. And the proof of this is that some of them belong to the Labour Party and used to support Jeremy Corbyn. So there's a lot of sort of quotes in it about from people's Twitter or Reddit past from quite a long time ago about the fact that they supported Jeremy Corbyn, as though that's a kind of benchmark for being left-wing. It suggests that there's a level of entryism about junior doctors activists, which is perhaps problematic, because if you think about any democratic organisation, unions in particular, they will tend to be populated by people that are more active than others. I mean, any democratic organisation is like that. And for a long period of time, in order to throw mud against the commies, you will argue that these people deliberately make themselves more active in order to either drive out other people or just simply they're the only ones actually doing the work. And, any organisation is like that. I would argue that the Conservative Party is probably like that. It's one of the reasons why certain 20-somethings can rise very rapidly in the Conservative Party if they actually just manage to, not have a Zimmer frame, effectively. The conclusion that Andrew comes up with places the onus on the government needing to do things, which, for a descriptive piece, is a fairly odd way of doing it. It would necessitate a revised approach from the government. Yes. And let's talk a little bit now about Andrew Gilligan. He was an advisor to Boris Johnson. He's a respected journalist in his own right. So, he writes for the Daily Telegraph. We'll come on to that in a second. But one has to say to themselves, why exactly did he decide to do this? Because somebody, a respected journalist like him, he was the one who was responsible for using the phrase sexed up about Tony Blair's dossier, that word again. So someone's paying him, but the question would have to be, well, who and why? Because the press, some of them picked up on this, and in the Telegraph you get the secretive whole left group driving the NHS doctors' strike. Yes, because the assumption here is, of course, that you won't read the more nuanced part of the report, like what I do, but you'll simply read that headline and it'll prove to you that the commies are once again on the march. Same with the Sun. It actually uses the damning dossier. What a lovely thing there. Yes, and once again, yes, some of the activists for Momentum, some were activists for Momentum, the group linked to ex-Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. It just proves it, doesn't it? Imagine there being supporters of Jeremy Corbyn who are left-wing. Astounding. You do get this. The notion is obviously that this isn't a real strike. It's being driven by those hardline lefties. Which brings us neatly, perhaps, to the policy exchange people themselves. Who exactly are this group? Well, they were set up by a group of fairly senior Tories, and the whole point of them, along with others, is, of course, to deliver pieces that will go into the press with little question. So you produce a piece which is, long and hard to read and is very well put together in terms of the notes, and everything is nicely researched. But it's simply there so that the right-wing press can use it as a stick to beat people with. And why in particular now? Well, somebody wanted it. And one of the things that you find about the policy exchange is, number one, that they're a charity, which is slightly odd. I'm not quite sure of the educational value of Andrew Gillian's piece. How is that particularly educational? And again, why now? Who exactly wanted it? They have a reputation for producing material after people give them money. In particular in around oil money, like Exxon, for example. They rate incredibly badly for saying who's funding them, along with certain others like the Adam Smith Institute, the Centre for Policy Studies, and the Institute for Economic Affairs. Yes, all of these people will not tell you who funds them, which, to my way of thinking, is slightly odd for a charity, isn't it? I mean, imagine Guide Dogs for the Blind flatly refusing to give any information about where their money comes from. You'd think that was slightly suspicious. And look at these groups: Adam Smith, Centre for Policy Studies, Institute for Economic Affairs, Policy Exchange. What do they all have in common? Well, they all have in common a particular libertarian view of the world. They all come from exactly the same spot. And they are funded by people for that very reason, to simply put forward one particular worldview. And they know full well, given the one particular worldview that there is in the British press and media, that they will simply be invited onto GB News or wherever to give their view on things. And nobody will say, "Why are you here? Who pays you?" ever. Well, occasionally they do, and it makes everyone squirm in their seats, because there's no answer for it. This is the country we live in, right? Whereby news and information appears to be free, but in fact is simply being fed to you. This is just propaganda. And Andrew is a very decent journalist, and I don't have any problems with that. But at least be honest about who's forking out the cash for this and the rationale behind it. Yeah, because otherwise, it's just kind of insulting my intelligence. You can insult other people's intelligence if you want to, but, I will keep chipping away in my own particular way and highlighting this stuff. It needs a lot more people to do it. It needs a lot more people to just simply say, we're not going to play this game anymore. All right? We're not going to play this game anymore. When you are presented to us as this expert who's somehow to be valued, well, fine. But why should we value your opinion? Who's paying you? That's it. Still dark outside. Can't even hear the birdies now. I hope everything's okay. Anyway, have a lovely Sunday. Yeah. I guess eventually it will become lighter. It will be nice. Take care.